Henry Ford Motor Company founder and the first billionaire. He built an empire that stretched from factories to a metal scraper. But what did he look like? What was his daily routine? Let's find out in today's episode of History 101. Henry Ford was born on July 16, 1863, at the height of the U.S. Civil War. His father, William, was an American who had made a fortune as a farmer and land speculator in Michigan. His mother, Margaret, was from Ireland. Henry was the fourth child and third son, but the only one of the four boys to survive infancy. As a child, Henry was incredibly inventive, always tinkering with whatever he had around him. And he would continue this practice throughout his entire life. When he was just 12 years old, he built a small boat and then used it to go on hunting expeditions with his father. While living on his father's farm, he also spent time assisting the local blacksmith, learning how to use tools and fix machinery. It was during this time that he developed his lifelong interest in mechanical engineering. He attended public school until the 5th grade when his family could no longer afford to send him. After studying for 2 years at a private academy, he began working full-time on his father's farm. In 1879, at the age of 16, Ford left home and moved to the nearby city of Detroit. There, he secured a job at a local machine shop, earning $2.40 per day. He quickly became known as a reliable and innovative worker, often staying late to experiment with new designs. In 1881, Ford moved to work at the Detroit Gateway, a large company that produced carriages. The long hours and low pay were hard to take, so after about a year and a half, he decided to start his own business. On August 5, 1882, at the age of 19, he established the Ford Brothers Company with his brother. Their business consisted of building and repairing carriages. However, by 1884, the brothers had a falling out and split the business in two. Henry continued under the name Ford Brothers, while his brother went on to form his own company. Around this time, Ford met Thomas Edison and they became friends. Edison had invented a new electric motor, which Ford recognized as having tremendous potential. So instead of using horses to pull carriages, why not use electricity? With this idea in mind, he set out to create a quadricycle powered by Edison's motor. In 1893, he incorporated the company as the Ford Motor Company. A year later, he and his team of engineers succeeded in creating the quadricycle. They tested it on the streets of Detroit. Everyone was amazed by the vehicle, but Ford knew that if he wanted to make money from this invention, he needed to refine it and build something better. So in 1896, he designed the first quadricycle model, which sold for $1,000 each. As demand for these vehicles grew, so did the size of Ford's operation. By 1899, he had built a factory on the banks of the Rouge River near downtown Detroit. The facility covered an area of 16 acres and employed over 100 people. However, the following year, a fire destroyed the plant. Ford borrowed money from his friend Thomas Edison to rebuild. But now he was in debt and under pressure to succeed. This motivated him to work harder than ever before. In 1903, he and his team of engineers created a new model of the quadricycle, which they called the Model T. Unlike the previous models, the Model T was affordable for the average person. It cost only $550. The company grew rapidly during the next few years and soon outgrew its new facility. In 1908, they built a much larger plant in Highland Park, Michigan. Here, they could produce 100,000 vehicles annually. By 1913, the Ford Motor Company was the largest manufacturer in the world, producing one car every 90 seconds. That year, Henry Ford made his first $1 million. However, his wealth grew rapidly during the next few years. In 1916, he became the first billionaire. Ford Motor Company had a huge impact on society. Not only did they make cars affordable for the average person, but they also changed the way goods were transported. For example, before the Model T, most people relied on horses to transport themselves and their goods. But with the advent of the automobile, it was possible to travel faster and farther than ever before. This led to the development of highways and other forms of mass transportation. Additionally, the Model T was responsible for changing the landscape of cities. Before automobiles, most people lived within walking distance of their workplaces. But with the advent of the car, it became possible for people to commute from the suburbs into the city center. During World War I, the Ford Motor Company produced more than 200,000 trucks and ambulances for the U.S. military. However, in 1917, the company ran into trouble. A group of anti-war protesters picketed outside the factory gates, demanding that Fords stop producing weapons for the military. The situation quickly turned violent, and police were called in to break up the demonstration. This event, known as the Ford Hunger March, resulted in the deaths of 2 protesters and several injuries. Ford was outraged by the violence and immediately ordered his security guards to protect the right of his workers to protest. He also announced that he would no longer produce weapons for the military. This decision cost him millions of dollars, but stood by it until the end of the war. In 1919, Ford decided to open a museum to showcase the history of the automotive industry. He filled it with antique cars, engines, and other memorabilia. The museum opened to the public in 1929 and is still in operation today. After suffering a series of strokes in 1926, Ford retired from his business in 1930. He spent his final years traveling the world and writing books. However, his health continued to decline, and he eventually developed pneumonia. On April 7, 1947, at the age of 84, Henry Ford passed away at his home in Fairlane, Michigan. Now that we know how he died, let's learn about his personal belongings. Henry Ford was a man of simple tastes. He drove a Model T Ford and wore plain clothes. He never smoked or drank alcohol and was a vegetarian. He kept his house sparsely furnished and his food was mostly bland. Despite his wealth, Ford was known for being frugal. He hated wasting anything and was constantly looking for ways to improve efficiency. He was also incredibly punctual. He kept a pocket watch on him at all times and expected everyone around him to be on time. It's safe to say that Henry Ford was a very busy man. So what did his daily routine look like? He usually woke up at 6 a.m. and immediately went to work. He would spend the morning in his office at the Ford Motor Company, where he would meet with executives and discuss company business. He also spent time in his workshop, where he would tinker with new inventions. Ford usually worked until 1 p.m., at which point he would take a break for lunch. He would eat a simple meal of soup or salad and then return to work. He would continue working until 6 or 7 p.m., at which point he would return home. At home, he would relax by reading or taking a walk. He was an avid reader and had a particular interest in science and technology. He also enjoyed nature and would often take long walks in the woods. He would spend the evening with his family, and then it was bedtime. Ford was a firm believer in the importance of sleep and would retire early so he could get a good night's rest. Let's talk about some interesting facts about Henry Ford. Did you know that he was a teetotaler? This means he never drank alcohol. He believed that alcohol was a waste of time and that it made people lazy. He also thought it was dangerous because it could lead to accidents. Ford was also a vegetarian. He believed that eating meat was cruel and unnecessary. He felt that there were plenty of other sources of protein available, such as beans and nuts. Another interesting fact about Henry Ford is that he was a firm believer in the power of positive thinking. He would often repeat the phrase, "Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right," to illustrate his point. Ford also believed that it was important to have a goal in life. He felt that if you didn't have a goal, you were unlikely to achieve anything. According to him, the first step towards achieving any goal was to clearly define it. Once you had a clear goal in mind, you could develop a plan to achieve it. He was also a strong believer in the importance of hard work. He felt that if you really wanted to achieve something, you had to be willing to put in the effort. According to him, there are no shortcuts to success. Another interesting fact about Henry Ford is that he was a staunch individualist. He believed that everyone should be free to do as they please as long as they weren't harming anyone else. He was also a strong believer in the importance of privacy. He was also a pacifist who believed that war was never the answer. He felt that there was always a better way to resolve conflicts without violence. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more great videos. We'll see you next time.